Money and looks don't matter, bro. It's the inside that what counts, bro. So I wanted to go over this topic of how a lot of people will say money and looks don't matter when they're having discussions on dating. So this is also the form of something like people studying in school and other people motivating them to go to high school, graduate, go to college, get your degree, work hard, get your master's, get your doctorate, because the harder you work, the harder you study, the better you're going to do in life, the more success you're going to have. And I get it in terms of the whole feel good, not wanting to make the world seem like a harsh place because it's already harsh enough, so trying to soften it down. But it doesn't really help anybody, because with something like the whole school thing and the work harder, the study harder and you'll do better than the next guy, and then once you get out of school, work harder than the next guy and you'll do better than him, it doesn't take into account things like someone's starting point. One person starting with two rich parents versus one person starting with a poor single parent, and the opportunities that are presented to them because of that. So if someone's going to inherit a large sum of money and the main point of working is for somewhere to live and food, if they're just going to inherit this large sum of money from a family that already has a house that's paid off and they're already going to have plenty of money for food, they don't have to do as many things with their day as someone who's starting from the bottom, so to speak. Someone who has not been presented those opportunities. Someone who comes from a family that's paying rent and they don't own any real estate. And so they're always moving around and they're always throwing money into these rentals, but they're not seeing any money from that because someone else already owns it. So those kind of things matter. And then genetics, height, personality, just personal preferences, certain information that was given to one person that wasn't to another. You could go down the list for an unlimited number of things that affect somebody's opportunities, their circumstance, their potential. So as much as it might be a feel-good thing to talk about life in a way that's equal and doesn't offend anybody, it doesn't necessarily help anybody either. So when it comes to the whole dating thing, and when someone says money and looks don't matter, you get what they're trying to do in terms of being nice and not making it seem like one human being is more valuable than the other, but it doesn't really help anybody on a day-to-day level with that. Because when you just say money and looks don't matter, it doesn't help the person. It sets them up for failure, basically, because you're getting it into their head that there's some sort of just world, some fair system in which they're never going to be seen as a different piece on the board than another piece. And when you don't know that and you don't have the self-awareness for that, you're going to continually get older and you're always going to be making mistakes and screwing up and getting mad, getting frustrated, not understanding why you were perceived a certain way or why somebody said that to you or did that certain thing to you. And when you don't have an awareness on where you stack up in terms of the money and the looks, then it's just not only with dating, but like every part of your life, you're not gonna hit your potential because you're not operating off of a place of really trying to recognize what your own piece on the board actually is. So there's never an end-all be-all when it comes to this stuff. So when people think of what they might think is the ultimate alpha male, whatever that would even be under their definition, anything that a guy can do or acquire or become, there's always another guy that fits that bill or does it better by whatever perspective. So because you're not the only guy that's in the world and there's all these other guys too, there's the competition level. So you could go down the checklist of the ultimate alpha male that's 6 foot and, you know, the job, the money, the looks, the charisma, the car, the house. But then the other guy has that and he's 6'1", or the other guy has that and he's 6'2", or the guy that was originally 6 foot, like if you made the original one, okay, the ultimate alpha male is gonna be 6'2", then there's the guy that's even shorter. There's the guy that's 5'10" or 5'11" that still has more of something than that guy has. And so depending on the situation and the circumstance and the particular woman and her preferences at that time, there is no ultimate sheet that you're just going to check every box and, okay, I've won the game, or I know how to play this game 100% now. And so there's always that gray area, there's always that spectrum. So when it comes to your decision making and what you want out of life, what you want out of relationships, what you want out of dating, you've got to be real about what it is you're looking for and where you are at your current age. So if children is something that you want in your future, you've got to get to a point of maturity to understand the monetary system we're in, and that it takes a little bit of money to not only take care of yourself, but to take care of a woman and also children at that point. So there's a difference between you being homeless on the street and you having a 2-story mansion that's completely paid off with a bunch of yard space and other properties that you rent out for extra income residually. Those are 2 different circumstances. The person that's homeless versus the person that owns a bunch of real estate, that's just a different environment to not only be with your woman, but to raise those kids and give them a bedroom and facilities and access to things. And so trying to not offend people it doesn't really help them in the long run, because someone might get offended by that concept and say, well, poor people have just the amount of right to have a kid as rich people or people with more money, and they do have the right, but it's their choice on what it is they're trying to bring into the world, how much burden they want, how much stress, and those things matter. So when you just don't think about them, it could catch up to you, because you were trying to operate on this just world, this fair economy, this everybody is equal and deserves equal opportunities, equal chance, equal results. You're not being real about where you actually stack up in the game. So in order to raise those kids that you want, you need a little bit of money, you need a little bit of resources. So when you're not being honest about the current money you make, it could affect you. So this could be like the guy that he gets a girlfriend or whatever after college. They're both 22 and they're together for 8 years, and now they're 30, and it's coming to a point where her biological clock's ticking in, and he hasn't really developed much yet in terms of career and finances, and so she has all these other options. And how long is she gonna wait for him to become successful, or for him to acquire that circumstance? Because like I mentioned before in the video, there's already billions of other guys, so you're not the only option to begin with. So who's to say that just because you were together for 8 years, from senior year of college 22 to 30, who's to say that that's just gonna work out, or oh, she's gonna remain with you just because you've spent so long investing into each other that she's gonna stick it out? She could leave at any point, just like you could leave. The same way anyone could leave a job for a better job, better position, more money. People can leave relationships and other human beings like that, a better circumstance for what they deemed that better circumstance to be. So all these metrics are important to know. Your looks in terms of your face and body, facial symmetry, bone structure, genetics, height, personality, chemistry, where you are spiritually, intelligence, finances, all these metrics are going to come into play. So these people that say looks and money don't matter, it doesn't do anybody any justice, and it doesn't help anybody to say that, because they clearly affect things. So yes, you can understand what they're trying to say by that, by saying that there's more to life than that, which is true. But it's one of those things too where it's kind of like a given, especially when you get to a certain age and you're just trying to have a more mature conversation about the world. When someone just wants to say something generic like that, like, hey, money and looks don't matter, it's like, well, yeah, they're not everything for sure. We're at a certain point where that's obvious, but to just say that it doesn't matter, you have no working context about what you're talking about in a day-to-day circumstance. So it doesn't help anybody make sense of their own circumstance, and they're going to end up making a bunch of mistakes and failing and not understanding why they were reacted to a certain way or perceived a certain way. There's just a certain point where you've got to understand that and move on from just the generic politically correct stuff, because there's going to be a difference between whether you're a guy that's 6'5" or 5'2". There's going to be a difference about the money that you have that can facilitate certain lifestyles, whether she even wants to look at your face all day, how good looking are you to her, whether she wants to be with your personality all day, your quirks, your mannerisms, just little things that you probably don't even think about yourself. So money and looks definitely matter. They matter in a physical, materialistic sense, in how we're operating in this world, and we need to survive. We need to deal with the next human being next to us. We need to find our way through this economy. So those are things that matter when it comes to your piece on the board and directing that piece in order to win the game, so to speak. So yes, it doesn't matter in the big picture sense if you want to get into the deeper spiritual, metaphysical concepts of that. Yes, it doesn't really matter. But in terms of the spiritual connecting with the physical in this world that we're currently living in, those things do matter. So it's good to take note of it, and it's good to have a sense of that. Because myself, just turning 27 at the beginning of this summer, going back to the example I used of someone that wants kids, if I want kids right now, I made a decision earlier this year to move out of the house I was living in, a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, 804 square feet, by myself. I made the decision to move back home in March with my family so I could stop paying $1,200 in rent. Even though it was a family rental, so I was paying family, which was cool, I just not seeing the money for that. So it makes more sense to me for what I want to move back in with family. How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good. But that's the difference. If I meet somebody in February versus March, that's the difference between whether I was living alone or living with my family, where my room is directly next to my mom's room in the house that I grew up with, where I moved back home to in March. So trying to facilitate any sort of relationship, if I meet a girl in February of this year, 2021, it's like, hey, come over to my pad because I have my own place. So that's a different thing than 1 month later in March, oh, come over to my place where my bedroom's here, my mom's bedroom is right next door. It's different. So at 27, based on her getting older and her biological clock, if she's really looking to facilitate a family, I'm not in a current place to go facilitate that family. I'm just not. So it doesn't make sense to get all down on yourself like, oh, she didn't pick you, or she had other options that weren't you, or how come she saw something different in someone else? How come she saw another guy as greener pastures than you? And so if you can look at yourself more from a third person view and actually notice those things about your circumstance, your finances, your looks, all of that, what you're trying to do, then it's not going to bother you because you're just going to know. And this can be with any sort of metric. Even race, for example, how people can have racial preferences in terms of how they date. And you can't get mad about it. People can have their preferences on whatever they want. So as a mixed race man myself, I've experienced this too, where yes, it makes me more ambiguous, so I have a wider cross-section of possibilities with women of a bunch of different races, but also too, I might be so diverse and so unique in another circumstance where me and her just don't relate because it's just not what she's used to experiencing. So it's like a coin flip constantly. The duality is always there with that. How's it going?
Hi.